Philadelphia was completely still at 2 a.m. Not a car humming down the street, not a voice drifting through the windows, just a heavy silence that made every small sound feel louder than it should. Inside his apartment, Riley lay half asleep, tangled in sheets, trying to escape another restless night. It was the kind of night where memories pressed too close, where the quiet felt too sharp. Then his phone buzzed. That vibration cut through the silence like a blade. Riley flinched upright, breath catching in his throat. Sleep fell away immediately as he reached blindly for the phone on his nightstand. The screen lit up the dark room. Ellie. Her name alone hit him like a punch to the chest. His ex-wife, the mother of his child, the woman he had loved more than anything, and lost. At 2 a.m., a call from Ellie didn't make sense. It didn't belong in this hour of the night. A call like this meant trouble, deep trouble. His pulse kicked hard as he stared at the screen, unable to breathe for a moment. Why would she call now? What happened? Is Jerome okay? Is she okay? His throat tightened. His hands trembled. He answered. Ellie, he blurted, but it wasn't Ellie. A woman's voice came through the line, steady, professional, carrying an urgency that made Riley's stomach drop instantly. Sir, are you Riley? She asked. He froze. That voice didn't belong to Ellie. It wasn't a friend. It wasn't anyone he recognized. Yes. This is Riley, he said, voice shaky, fear spreading fast. Sir, I'm calling from Philadelphia General Hospital. Those words slammed into him with full force. His mouth went dry. His heart hammered so hard he felt it in his ears. This was it. This was the nightmare he always feared in quiet, private moments but never spoke aloud. She's here in critical condition, the nurse continued. She was brought in after a serious accident. She's in surgery right now. Riley's body went cold. What? Surgery? He whispered, barely getting the word out. Is she? She's alive, the nurse said quickly. But she suffered multiple injuries. She regained consciousness for a short moment. During that time, she made one request. Riley's breath stopped. This was the moment everything shifted. The first moment that changed the entire direction of his night, maybe his entire life. She said. The nurse paused, as if choosing the words carefully. She said to call Riley, only Riley. The phone nearly slipped from his hand. Only him. After 2 years apart. After everything. In a moment where she didn't know if she would survive. She asked for him. His heartbeat crashed into overdrive. He stumbled out of bed, searching for his shoes with shaking hands. I'm coming, he said, voice cracking from panic and emotion. I'm coming right now. He didn't even grab a jacket. He didn't check the time. He didn't think. He just bolted out of the apartment, desperate, terrified, and determined. Nothing else mattered now. He had to get to her. Riley's breathing was uneven as he rushed into the hallway, keys clutched tightly in his hand. His chest felt tight, almost painful, and beneath all the panic was something deeper, something that struck every viewer who has ever loved someone and lost them long before they were ready. Because nights like this don't come often, but when they do, they leave a mark forever. And so, before this story goes any further, let me ask you, the viewer, something important. Have you ever realized the value of someone only when life pushed you to the edge? Have you ever wished for just one more moment, one more chance to fix something you broke? Has pressure, pride, or chasing the wrong thing ever cost you someone you cared about? If you have, then you already understand the weight on Riley's heart. He wasn't just racing toward a hospital. He was racing toward the possibility of facing all the regrets he had tried to bury. He was facing the fear that life might take Ellie away before he ever made things right. This is not just a story of a man hearing bad news. This is a story about love, mistakes, second chances, and the painful truth that sometimes the person who once walked away is the same person we call for when life slips out of our control. And if you're new here, welcome to Mr. Graham Stories, where we share meaningful stories packed with life lessons, heartfelt moments, and powerful experiences that reflect real struggles and real hope. If you're returning, welcome back. We're grateful for you. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an inspiring story that might just shift something in your life. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Now let's walk with Riley as he steps into a night he will never forget. Riley's footsteps echoed sharply down the metal stairwell as he took each step 2 at a time. His breath came fast, uneven, each inhale filled with fear he couldn't swallow down. The nurse's voice replayed in his mind again and again. The accident, the surgery, the urgency. But there was one piece of her message he couldn't shake. The one detail that hit his heart harder than anything else. She regained consciousness for a moment, and she said, "Call Riley. Only Riley." He gripped the stair railing, steadying himself as the weight of those words made his knees weak. Ellie had asked for him. Not her mother, not her closest friend, not anyone else. Only him. Why? Why, after everything? After the divorce? After the silence? After 2 long years of living separate lives? The thought made his chest tighten fiercely. He pushed through the front door of his building, the cool night air slapping against his face as if urging him forward. Outside, the streets were quiet, lit only by distant traffic lights and the occasional street lamp. His car sat alone at the curb, waiting. He fumbled with the keys, hands shaking, unable to escape the pounding questions inside his head. The nurse's words weren't fading, they were getting louder. "Sir, she asked for you," she insisted. He dropped into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut, gripping the wheel as if trying to hold on to something solid in a moment when everything felt like it was slipping away. Why him? Because there were still pieces between them that had never healed. Because love doesn't disappear just because life bends in the wrong direction. Or because, in a moment where she feared she might not make it, her heart spoke before her mind had time to filter anything. He didn't know. All he knew was that Ellie had called for him. And that knowledge crushed and lifted him at the same time. His phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with the hospital's number. He snatched it up immediately. "Hello? I'm on my way," he said quickly, voice trembling. The nurse spoke again, steady but direct. "Sir, please hurry. The doctors are working as fast as they can." Riley pressed his forehead to the steering wheel for a second, forcing himself to breathe through the panic swelling in his chest. "I'm coming," he whispered, his voice breaking around the words. "Please, just take care of her." He hung up and turned the key. The engine roared to life, and in that exact moment, the moment the car lurched forward and the city blurred into streaks of light around him, Ellie didn't ask for help. She didn't ask for comfort. She didn't ask for anyone familiar. She asked for Riley, the man she once loved, the man she left, the man who broke her heart, the man she trusted in a moment she couldn't even fully open her eyes. That truth hit him harder than any collision ever could. He stepped on the gas and raced through the empty streets, desperate to get to the one person whose voice still lived in the deepest parts of him. Whatever waited at that hospital, he had to face it. He had to face her. The city blurred past Riley as he sped through the quiet streets, headlights cutting through the darkness like a lifeline guiding him forward. Every block he passed felt both too slow and too fast. Too slow to reach her, too fast for his racing thoughts to keep up. Because now the questions he'd avoided for 2 years were hitting him harder than the cold wind brushing across his windshield. Would Ellie survive this night? Was she moments away from slipping out of reach forever? Could their broken marriage ever have a chance to heal, or was fate giving him one last moment before everything closed for good? Why did she ask only for him? What did her heart reveal in that split second of fear, something she couldn't hide even from herself? And if she survived, what would they say to each other? What truths would finally be forced into the open? What emotions had been buried but never extinguished? As Riley gripped the steering wheel, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Hope and fear colliding at once. What if this wasn't just a crisis? What if it was a turning point? The kind life only gives once. He blew past a yellow light, breath quickening, eyes burning with the weight of everything he'd lost, and everything he might still have a chance to save. Before this story continues, I want to pause and speak directly to you watching right now. If you're feeling the tension of this moment, if you're already hoping for a miracle or wondering where this journey is going, please take a second to support this channel. It truly helps us more than you know. Hit the like button so YouTube shares this story with more incredible viewers. Comment where you're watching from in the current time. It helps grow our community. And subscribe to Mr. Graham's Stories if you enjoy emotional, inspiring storytelling that speaks to real-life lessons and second chances. Now, back to Riley. He tightened his grip on the wheel. His heartbeat drummed so loudly it drowned out the hum of the engine. His mind replayed every mistake, every unspoken apology, every moment with Ellie he would give anything to relive differently. Tonight wasn't about regrets anymore. Tonight was about action, about showing up, about being the man he should have been long ago. As he turned sharply onto the hospital street, the glowing red emergency sign came into view, bold, urgent, impossible to ignore. He pressed harder on the gas. He wasn't just driving. He was racing against time, against fear, against the possibility of losing the one person who had once been his entire world. The night that would change everything had officially begun. Riley's car shot down the nearly empty streets, headlights bouncing across damp pavement as he sped through the quiet of the early morning. His fingers clenched the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles had turned pale. His breath came in short, ragged bursts, each inhale catching in his throat as if the night air itself was pressing against him. His heart hammered so violently that it almost drowned out the hum of the engine. He couldn't stop hearing the nurse's voice. He couldn't stop hearing her say the words that had shaken him to his core. "She's in surgery. She asked for you." He swallowed hard, pushing those words down before they could break him again. He tried to keep his focus sharp, but everything inside him trembled, a storm he had no control over. He felt a pain deep in his chest, the kind that comes only when fear and regret collide. His mind pushed him back to the moment he looked at his phone screen. Ellie, her name at 2 a.m., her name after 2 years of distance and careful boundaries. He had stared at that glowing screen for an entire second that felt like a lifetime. Every muscle in his body had tensed, as if bracing for something he wasn't ready to confront. And then he answered, and everything changed. The nurse's voice had carried urgency, controlled, yet unmistakably serious. Riley had felt his world tilt before she even explained what happened. Now, as he sped toward the hospital, the full weight of that conversation slammed into him again. Ellie was hurt. Ellie was in danger. Ellie was in surgery. And she had woken up just long enough to ask for him. His foot pressed harder on the accelerator. Inside his chest, something cracked open. A feeling he had spent 2 years trying to shut down, trying to bury beneath work and routine and silence. Regret. It rose up like a wave, pulling memories with it. The late nights he'd chosen work over dinner. The moments he'd walked past Ellie without noticing how tired she looked. The way he'd brushed off her hurt with promises he never kept. The tears she had tried to hide before turning away. The night she packed Jerome into the car seat and closed the door behind her. He blinked hard, vision blurring for a second. He exhaled shakily, fighting to focus on the road. "This is my fault," he whispered, voice strained, barely audible under the engine's steady rumble. All of it. The words tasted bitter, because in many ways they were true. He had spent 2 years replaying moments from their marriage, the good, the bad, and the moments that had broken both of them. He had blamed work, stress, timing, anything he could think of. But deep down he knew the truth. He had failed to show up when it mattered most. And now, when Ellie needed someone, she had called for him. That truth scared him more than anything else. He turned sharply at the next intersection, tires gripping the wet asphalt. The glow of a traffic light reflected across the windshield as it shifted from yellow to red. But Riley didn't slow down. He looked both ways and powered through, desperate to close the distance between him and the hospital. His breath fogged the cold glass for a moment, and he wiped it with the sleeve of his shirt. His hands were trembling. He forced himself to breathe slower, but it did little to settle the pounding inside him. He reached the next block just as another memory cut through him, sharp, vivid, unexpected. The last time he had seen Ellie cry, not out of anger, not out of exhaustion, but out of heartbreak. He had walked into Jerome's nursery that night after a long day at work. Ellie was sitting there on the floor, holding their son close, rocking him gently. Jerome had finally fallen asleep after hours of fussing. Ellie's eyes were puffy and red, and when she looked up at Riley, something inside her seemed already broken. "You weren't here," she had whispered. It wasn't a shout, not a complaint, just a truth. He had stood in the doorway, too drained to argue, too disconnected to understand the depth of her pain. He realized now what she had felt, alone, unsupported, unseen. He blinked away the memory quickly, jaw tightening. "I should have been better," he murmured to himself, gripping the wheel. "I should have listened. I should have changed sooner." His voice cracked. "If something happens to you, Ellie, I'll never forgive myself." The dashboard clock glowed faintly, 2:11 a.m., barely 11 minutes since the call, but it felt like an hour had passed. The hospital wasn't far now. Riley made another turn, speeding past familiar storefronts, a cafe Ellie once loved, the park he used to walk through with Jerome in a stroller on Sunday mornings. Each landmark was another reminder of the life he had lost, the life he still wanted, and the life he was terrified of losing forever. His breath hitched again when he thought of Jerome, their son, barely old enough to understand anything about the world. What would he say someday if Riley had to explain that his mother didn't make it, that his father wasn't there when she needed him most? The idea tore at him viciously. "No," Riley muttered, shaking his head. "I won't accept that. She has to be okay." He thought back to the nurse's tone. Not hopeless, not panicked, but urgent. Urgent meant there was still time. Urgent meant there was still a chance. Urgent meant he had to get there, now. He forced himself to sit straighter, gripping the wheel with renewed determination. His pulse steadied, just a little, not enough to calm him, but enough to sharpen his focus. He glanced at his passenger seat, where Jerome's small plush dinosaur was still lying from the last time Riley had taken him for the weekend. It must have fallen out of the diaper bag earlier. He picked it up, squeezing it in his palm. "Your mom's going to be okay," he whispered to the little toy, as if speaking it aloud would make it true. "I won't let anything happen to her. Not again." A deep breath steadied him. He placed the toy gently on the seat, eyes returning to the road. Finally, after what felt like the longest drive of his life, the towering red emergency sign came into view, glowing starkly against the dark sky. Riley's chest tightened with a mix of dread and determination. He pressed the gas a little harder. He wasn't arriving as a CEO tonight. He wasn't arriving as an ex-husband. He wasn't arriving as someone who had made mistakes. He was arriving as the man Ellie had called for. Only him. And whatever waited inside that building, he was ready to face it. The city stretched before Riley like a long, silent corridor. Buildings loomed on either side of the road, their windows lit here and there, but mostly dark. A few street lights flickered overhead, casting faint circles of gold onto the pavement as he sped beneath them. The emptiness of the streets made his tires sound louder, sharper, as if the world had gone quiet just to hear his panic. The road ahead seemed endless, yet not long enough. Every mile felt like both a prayer and a punishment. The steering wheel vibrated slightly under his hands as he pressed the car beyond what was reasonable. His pulse had settled into a heavy pound, steady but relentless, matching the urgency in his chest. He wasn't just driving. He was fighting the weight of 2 years of silence. 2 years of regret. 2 years of what-ifs that he tried to bury but couldn't. The cold night air seeped through the tiny crack in his window. It snapped at his skin, making his eyes sting, keeping him awake and aware as he navigated the quiet streets. As he passed a familiar intersection, something inside him snapped loose. The last time he'd driven through here was before the divorce, before everything broke. Ellie had been in the passenger seat, pregnant with Jerome, gently rubbing her belly as she laughed at one of his awkward attempts at humor. The memory hit hard. Hard enough that he had to blink twice to steady himself. He remembered how she had rested her head against the window that night, humming softly to their unborn son. There had been a peace on her face that he hadn't appreciated then, too wrapped up in deadlines and messages on his phone to recognize the beauty of that moment. He gripped the wheel tighter. "You wasted so much time." The words weren't spoken, but they echoed inside him all the same. He made a right turn, and something sharp tugged at his awareness. It wasn't a sound. It was a thought, rising uninvited. The last moments he'd seen Ellie before their divorce became final. It had been raining that night, too. He'd arrived late for the meeting with her and her lawyer, soaked, exhausted, unprepared for the emotional blow waiting for him. Ellie had sat at the small table with her documents neatly arranged, her hair pulled back, her eyes swollen but steady. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She simply said, "I can't live like this anymore, Riley." Those words struck him now the same way they struck him then, deep, painful, unforgettable. But that wasn't the moment that haunted him. The moment that truly haunted him came later, after they signed everything. He'd followed her outside not to change her mind, but because something inside him refused to let her walk away without one last chance to understand him. "Ellie," he called out, voice trembling. She turned. Rain streaked her face, mixing with tears she tried to ignore. "I'm sorry," he'd said. "For everything." Ellie had looked at him for a long moment, not with hatred, but with hurt so deep it shook him. "I know you're sorry," she whispered, "but I needed you long before you realized it." That sentence lived inside him. It lived in the corners of every quiet room. It lived in the way he hesitated before answering anyone's call that wasn't work. It lived in the way he sometimes sat alone in Jerome's old rocking chair, staring at the wall and thinking of everything he could have done differently. Tonight, those words felt sharper than ever, because tonight, Ellie was fighting for her life, and she had called for him. Riley's breath trembled as he made another turn, passing a row of shuttered shops. He caught sight of a park bench under a dim light, one he and Ellie had sat on years ago when talking about baby names. She had leaned into him that night, excitedly debating between the names she liked and the ones she insisted he suggest, even though he was terrible at coming up with any. "I just want his name to mean something," she'd said. "I want him to feel seen in this world." He remembered the way her voice softened when she said it. He remembered the glow in her eyes, the hope in her smile. He swallowed hard. He had failed her in so many ways. He hadn't seen her when she needed him most. He hadn't shown up until it was too late. And now, if tonight went wrong, he would carry that truth forever. His chest tightened painfully at the thought. The red glow of another streetlight washed over him as he drove underneath it. The flicker of the light reflected across the dashboard, illuminating the small plush dinosaur still sitting on the seat. Jerome's little toy, left behind in one of those rushed handoffs between him and Ellie. He reached over and touched it lightly. Their son had her eyes, warm, honest, and expressive. He had her laugh too, bright and contagious, and right now, that little boy would be asleep, unaware that the world could change before morning. He needs his mother, Riley thought, gripping the wheel again. He needs her laugh, her warmth, her strength. He needs her. And truthfully, so did Riley. The hospital drew closer with each turn, but as he drove, another memory surfaced, uninvited and piercing. The last time they argued, really argued. It was the night Ellie had finally broken down in the nursery. Jerome had been sick, crying nonstop. Ellie had been exhausted, worn thin by months of doing everything alone. Riley had come home late, again, distracted by a phone call, even as their son cried in his arms. Ellie had snapped, not out of anger, but out of sheer exhaustion and heartbreak. "Do you even see what this is doing to us?" She had whispered, tears falling. "I'm drowning, Riley, and you're not even here to notice." He remembered reaching out to her, trying to apologize, but the words never landed. He was too late. He didn't realize the severity of her pain until she was already halfway out the door with Jerome. He exhaled shakily, returning to the present. Tonight was forcing him to face a truth he had avoided for too long. He had loved Ellie deeply, but he hadn't loved her well. And now she was lying on an operating table, hurt, alone, in danger, calling only for him. The hospital came into view in the distance. Its large glowing sign rose above the buildings like a beacon, pulling him forward. The closer he got, the colder his hands felt, despite the heat running in the car. "What if I lose her?" he whispered, voice catching. "What if this really is the end?" A deep ache settled in his chest at the thought. He shook his head. No, not tonight. Not like this. He pressed the gas a little harder, leaning forward as the parking lot entrance approached. He turned in sharply, the tires crunching across the gravel near the emergency ramp. The building towered above him, quiet but intimidating in its stillness. He pulled into a space and threw the car into park. For a moment, he didn't move. He sat there, gripping the wheel as the weight of everything pressed down at once. Then he forced himself to breathe, one deep, steadying breath. He reached for Jerome's plush dinosaur, squeezing it gently. "For her," he whispered. "For our family." Then he pushed the door open and stepped out, the cold air hitting him immediately. Every step he took toward the entrance was heavy and urgent, each one pushing him closer to a truth he couldn't escape. He wasn't just trying to save Ellie tonight. He was trying to save what little remained of the life they once had, and maybe what could still be rebuilt. With one final glance at the sky, Riley hurried through the sliding doors of the emergency wing. The glass doors to the emergency wing slid open with a soft hiss as Riley stepped inside. The shift from cold night air to harsh hospital lighting struck him immediately, forcing his eyes to adjust. The sterile scent of disinfectant filled his lungs as he crossed into the lobby, heart pounding so loudly he could almost hear it echoing in his ears. For a moment he froze, not because he didn't know where to go, but because the weight of this place pressed against him. Hospitals had a way of making time feel heavy, as if every second mattered more than the last. He scanned the waiting area quickly. A half-empty coffee cup sat abandoned on a side table. A nurse hurried past pushing a supply cart. A security guard stood near the entrance with arms crossed, watching the room with tired eyes. A few chairs were occupied by people slumped forward, waiting for news about someone they loved, but none of that mattered. He was looking for one person, and then he saw her. Imani. She stood in the far corner near a row of plastic chairs, pacing a short stretch of worn linoleum. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, one hand gripping her elbow as if trying to keep herself from falling apart. Her eyes were red, her expression strained, and the moment she spotted Riley, she stopped pacing. "Riley," she breathed, relief flooding her face. She moved toward him quickly. He reached her in 3 long strides. "What happened?" he asked immediately, voice tight. "How is she? Is she—" Imani held up a hand, not to silence him but because she was trying to steady herself. "She's still in surgery," she said. "They've been in there for a while, but the doctor said they're doing everything they can." Riley nodded once, swallowing hard. "What exactly happened? Please, tell me everything." Imani took a shaky breath. She was leaving work late. She was on her way home. A driver ran a red light and hit her car on the driver's side. She paused, emotion flickering in her eyes. They said the impact was strong. Riley's stomach twisted. He shook his head slowly, trying to push away the image of Ellie trapped in a crushed car. "Was she alone?" he asked. "Yes," Imani said quickly. "Jerome was home with her mom. He's safe." Relief washed through him, but it didn't erase the fear gripping his chest. Imani continued, voice softer now, almost trembling. "When the EMTs reached her, she was unconscious. They said she regained consciousness for just a moment in the ambulance. She was disoriented, scared, in pain." Riley's hands curled into fists at his sides. "And she kept saying your name," Imani whispered, over and over. "She wouldn't stop until they promised to call you." He felt something inside him tighten fiercely, almost painfully. A mix of guilt, hope, and fear. His throat tightened so much he could barely swallow. He nodded, but couldn't find words. Imani stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I know things were complicated between you two. But tonight, she asked for you like you were the only person in the world who could comfort her." Riley's jaw clenched, emotions threatening to spill over. He forced his gaze to remain steady. "I'm here now," he murmured. "I'm not leaving." Before Imani could respond, the double doors leading to the operating rooms swung open. A surgeon stepped into the lobby, removing his gloves and pulling down his mask. His expression was focused, tired, but not grim. Both Riley and Imani rushed toward him. "Ellie Brooks?" the surgeon asked, scanning their faces. "Yes," Riley said instantly. "I'm her." He stopped himself. He wasn't her husband anymore. But the surgeon didn't wait for him to finish. "Her condition has stabilized," the doctor said. "We repaired internal bleeding and addressed several injuries. She's still under anesthesia, but she made it through the operation." Riley let out a slow, shaky breath. It felt as if a tight band around his chest finally loosened. Imani covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes filling again, this time with relief. "She'll need monitoring," the doctor continued. "Her ribs are fractured, her arm is broken, and she'll be very sore for a while. But she's young and otherwise healthy. That worked in her favor tonight." "Can we see her?" Riley asked, voice low but urgent. "She's being transferred to recovery now," the surgeon said. "One of you can go back when the nurse gives the okay." Imani immediately shook her head and gestured toward Riley. "He should go first." The doctor gave a small nod and stepped away, leaving Riley and Imani standing in a sudden, heavy silence. "I'll let her mom know what the doctor said," Imani whispered. "But you go. She wanted you." Riley looked at her with gratitude and something deeper, a quiet understanding of how meaningful that decision was. He placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, then turned toward the hallway the surgeon had come from. A nurse motioned him forward. "This way, sir." Every step down that long hallway felt heavier than the last. The lights above flickered softly, the sound of distant machines humming somewhere behind the walls. Riley's pulse pounded in his ears, matching the rhythm of his quickening footsteps. They reached a small recovery room, dimly lit but calm. The nurse opened the door gently. "She's resting," she said quietly. "You can sit with her." Riley stepped inside. There she was. Ellie lay in the bed, still and pale, a blanket pulled up to her waist. Her left arm rested in a sling, and there were faint bruises along her cheek and forehead. Tubes and monitors surrounded her, the soft beeping creating a steady rhythm in the room. Riley's breath hitched. Seeing her like this, vulnerable, hurt, fragile, tore something inside him. He moved closer slowly, his chest tightening with every step. He reached the side of the bed and swallowed hard. His shaking hand hovered for a moment before he gently touched hers. Her skin was cool, but it was real. She was here, alive. "Ellie," he whispered, voice cracking. "I'm here." Her eyelids fluttered slightly. Riley leaned in, heart pounding. "It's me. I'm right here." Her lips parted the tiniest bit. A soft breath escaped her. "Riley." The single word, barely audible, drenched in weakness, hit him with more force than anything he had felt in years. His eyes burned. His throat tightened. His heart pulled toward her as if it had been waiting for that one fragile syllable to beat again. "I'm here," he whispered, gripping her hand gently. "I'm right here, Ellie. I'm not going anywhere." The monitor beside Ellie's bed hummed in a steady rhythm, soft lights blinking in predictable patterns. Riley sat beside her, his hand gently wrapped around hers. Every now and then, her fingers twitched, reminding him she was still here, still fighting, still breathing. But as he watched her chest rise and fall in slow medicated breaths, his mind drifted backward, far beyond the accident, beyond the divorce, beyond the months of tension, loneliness, and missed moments. His thoughts traveled to the first night he ever saw her, the night everything in his life quietly shifted, even though he didn't recognize it at the time. 4 years earlier, Riley walked into a repurposed warehouse in West Philadelphia with the stiff posture of a man who didn't know how to blend in. Exposed brick walls surrounded him, warm string lights ran across old beams overhead, and lively music floated through the air. It wasn't the kind of place he'd usually be on a Thursday night, but a colleague had insisted. "Bro, you need to leave Center City once in a while," his coworker had said. "Meet people who don't speak in code and quarterly projections." So here he was, surrounded by art, color, laughter, and faces he'd never seen before. The space pulsed with creativity. Paintings, photographs, and sculptures from local teens lined the walls. Tables displayed handcrafted jewelry and small clay pieces. The entire room was alive with chatter and energy. Riley felt out of place and overdressed in a tailored blazer and polished shoes. Most people were casually dressed, comfortable, and effortlessly social. He was trying to look interested in a vibrant abstract painting when he heard a voice. Behind him, "You're staring at that like it just told you your taxes were wrong." Riley turned and froze. Ellie stood there with a playful smile, one eyebrow raised, amusement dancing in her eyes. She wore a burnt orange blouse tucked into dark jeans, her braids pulled into a loose bun. She looked confident, warm, and absolutely in her element. Riley stammered, caught completely off guard. "I'm just admiring it." She stepped closer, her voice gentler now. "It's okay if you don't get it. Most people don't at first glance. Art isn't about understanding. It's about feeling something." Riley swallowed, trying not to look as lost as he felt. "Well, it's definitely colorful." Ellie laughed, not a quiet laugh, a full, unrestrained laugh that echoed lightly through the room. It caught him completely off guard. "You're honest," she said, smiling. "I like that." Riley shifted awkwardly. Riley. "I'm Ellie," she replied, extending her hand. Her handshake was firm, warm, confident, the opposite of his stiff, corporate looseness. "You organize this?" he asked. "I do," she said proudly. "The kids at the center create everything you see here. The money raised goes back into programs for them. Supplies, mentors, weekend projects, all of it." "That's incredible," Riley said, and for once, he wasn't trying to say the right thing. He meant it. Ellie studied him for a moment, tilting her head. "You're not from around here, are you?" Riley cleared his throat. "Is it that obvious?" "Very," she teased. "Relax. Nobody's judging you. Much." His face flushed slightly, but her playful smile eased his discomfort. He found himself smiling back. Ellie led him toward a painting of a mother and child, bold colors flowing through the piece. "A 13-year-old made this," she said softly. "He lost his mom 2 years ago." This was his way of talking about her without using words. Riley stared at the painting, really seeing it for the first time. "Wow, that's..." Emotion pricked his voice unexpectedly. "That's powerful." Ellie nodded. "He's talented, and he's been through a lot. Most of the kids here have. Riley continued staring at the painting. Something about the vulnerability in the brush strokes, the soft outline of the mother's hand on the child's shoulder, tugged at him. You help them tell their stories, Riley said. That's meaningful. Ellie glanced at him with a softer expression. No teasing this time. Thank you, she whispered. For a brief moment they simply stood there, shoulder to shoulder, taking in the piece. Then Riley broke the silence. So, is it weird if I say I want to buy it? Ellie laughed again. Not weird, impressive. But I warn you, the artist's confidence might skyrocket. I'm willing to risk that, Riley said, smiling. She turned to face him fully. Let me guess, she said dramatically, pointing at him. You're going to buy it to impress me. Riley blinked. Well, her laughter returned, warm and teasing. Relax, I'm joking. Mostly, he exhaled with a nervous chuckle. Honestly, I really like it. Good, she said. That's the only reason you should buy art. Riley nodded, then added quietly, but if it makes you smile, that's a bonus too. Ellie blinked. The teasing faded for a moment, replaced with a softer look. Oh, she murmured. Smooth, was it? He asked with a nervous grin. I'm not great at this. That's exactly why it worked, she teased again. They walked the fundraiser together, Ellie introducing him to students whose work lined the walls. Riley was awkward at first, but the kids warmed up to him quickly. One teenager asked Riley what he did for work. I build software, Riley said. Aw, man, the teen responded. So you're like Rich? Riley coughed. No, what? No, Ellie burst out laughing again, clutching her stomach. It's okay, she told the teen. He's working on his humility. Riley shook his head with an embarrassed smile, but even he couldn't help laughing. The more time he spent with Ellie, the more fascinated he became. She moved through the room with purpose, speaking to parents, checking on kids, talking about art and community programs with passion that made Riley rethink everything he thought he knew about impact. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't chasing recognition. She was just good, genuinely good. And he hadn't realized how much he needed that kind of light in his life until he saw her again across the room, smiling proudly at the teen she mentored. His heart tugged in a way he didn't fully understand. Toward the end of the night, Riley found Ellie near a display table. He walked up awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. So, I bought that painting, he said. You did? She smiled widely. He's going to be thrilled. Well, I tried to be discreet, Riley admitted, but I think I accidentally outbid someone's grandmother. Ellie burst out laughing. Oh no. Was she tiny and wearing a purple scarf? Yes, Riley said, relieved. You know her? Yep, Ellie replied. She'll forgive you. Maybe. Riley groaned. Great. I've already made an enemy. A very sweet enemy, Ellie teased. You'll survive. He handed her his phone. Well, could you give me your number for the receipt, the office, paperwork? Ellie took the phone, typing with a small smile. Is that what this is for, Mr. Software Man? Riley swallowed. Maybe. She handed it back. There. Now you have it. For paperwork, of course. Riley looked down at the new contact saved in his phone. Ellie, he read aloud. She raised an eyebrow. Just Ellie? He cleared his throat. Well, you didn't give me your last name. You didn't ask, she replied with a grin. He laughed softly. Right, next time. There's going to be a next time? She asked, an amused challenge in her tone. I hope so, he said honestly. Her expression softened. Me too. And in that small electric moment, something shifted between them. A spark neither of them fully acknowledged yet, but one that would grow into something deep, beautiful, and unforgettable. A few days after the fundraiser, Ellie and Riley met again, this time intentionally. Riley had texted her a simple message. I still owe you for laughing at me the other night. Coffee? Ellie responded with a winking emoji. Then, Saturday, 10 a.m. Don't be late. Riley wasn't late. He arrived 10 minutes early. They met at a small cafe near University City, a neighborhood Ellie adored for its diversity and energy. She walked in wearing a soft gray sweater and jeans, her smile bright enough to make Riley forget every line of corporate polish he had rehearsed on the way there. You're early, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. I didn't want to make a bad impression. You already made one, she teased, but you're improving. He laughed, shaking his head. Fair, I'll take that. Their banter was instant, warm, and effortless. Whenever Riley began to overthink a sentence, Ellie knocked the tension out of the air with humor. Whenever Ellie slipped into storytelling about her job or the kids she mentored, Riley leaned in with real interest, not to impress her, but because she moved him in ways he didn't yet have words for. After coffee, their quick meetup turned into a 3-hour walk through nearby streets lined with murals and food trucks. Ellie pointed out her favorite spots, hidden gems Riley never knew existed despite living just a few miles away. That's the best taco truck in the city, she said, nodding toward a bright red truck parked near a corner. You sure it's safe? He asked, eyeing the peeling stickers on the side. Ellie burst out laughing. Riley, please. Come on. He tried a taco. It changed his life. Okay, he said between bites. I've clearly been living wrong. Ellie grinned, bumping his shoulder lightly. Stick with me. I'll show you the real Philadelphia. And she did. Over the following weeks, Ellie and Riley's relationship grew through simple but meaningful moments. Late-night walks, volunteer events at the community center, outdoor concerts, food from her favorite family-owned spots, occasional dinners at Riley's preferred restaurants where Ellie pretended to be unimpressed by white tablecloths and fancy desserts but secretly enjoyed them. The contrast in their backgrounds wasn't a barrier, it was part of the chemistry. Riley liked order, structure, predictability. Ellie thrived on heart, connection, spontaneity. Together, they found a balance neither realized they needed. The first time Riley met Ellie's family, he wore khakis and a button-down shirt, and immediately regretted it. It was a Saturday afternoon barbecue at her cousin's house in West Philadelphia. Kids ran around the yard with water guns. Music played loudly through outdoor speakers. Smoke from the grill floated through the air. Tables overflowed with food. Ribs, cornbread, mac and cheese, greens, rice, chicken wings. Ellie whispered as they walked in. Relax. They're friendly. Friendly was an understatement. Within 5 minutes, one of her uncles handed Riley a plate so full it bent in the middle. Eat up, man. You're too skinny. We'll fix that. Riley blinked. Thank you. Ellie snickered quietly beside him. Later, a group of neighborhood teenagers challenged him to a quick basketball game. Riley tried to decline, not because he didn't want to play, but because he knew he lacked skills. They won't go easy on you, Ellie warned. They're like 15, Riley whispered back. Exactly, she said. Good luck. 10 minutes later, the teens had him sweating, stumbling, and entirely out of breath. When he missed a layup and nearly tripped over his own feet, Ellie laughed so hard she had to hold onto her cousin's shoulder. But Riley didn't care. He felt alive. He felt included. He felt seen. By the time they left, Ellie's family had unofficially claimed him as one of their own. You survived, Ellie teased as they walked to the car. Barely, Riley said, breathing hard. But your family's great. Ellie's expression softened. They liked you. A lot. Riley smiled, knowing how much that meant. Ellie met Riley's parents a few weeks later. They lived just outside Philadelphia in the suburbs. Quiet streets, manicured lawns, trimmed hedges. Ellie felt the contrast the moment she stepped out of the car. Riley took her hand. You okay? Nervous, she admitted. Try not to abandon me. I would never, he said, squeezing her hand. Dinner was polite, formal, structured, nothing like Ellie's family gatherings. But Riley's parents were kind. His mother complimented Ellie's work. His father asked thoughtful questions about the community center. Ellie answered gracefully, even when the conversation felt unfamiliar. And when Riley's mother asked how they met, Ellie's playful spark returned. He bought a painting to impress me, she said. Riley groaned quietly. His parents chuckled. And the ice broke. After that, everything became easier. The months that followed were full of moments that stitched Riley and Ellie together in ways neither expected. One evening, they sat by the Schuylkill River, eating pizza straight from the box. Ellie leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. You know, she murmured, I didn't expect you to be funny. I wasn't aware I was, Riley replied. That's exactly what makes it funny, she teased. He smiled, brushing a braid back from her cheek. I didn't expect you to change my life. Ellie's breath caught for a second. Did the first? She whispered. Yes, he said simply. And she kissed him. Soft, warm, certain. It happened in December during a Philadelphia holiday market. Snow fell lightly, coating the ground in a thin white blanket. Vendors sold ornaments, hot cocoa, knitted scarves, candles. The love sculpture glowed red against the winter sky. Riley and Ellie walked hand in hand, bundled in scarves. She was laughing at something he said when he suddenly stopped walking. "Ellie," he murmured. She turned and froze. He was already kneeling. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes widened. Tears welled almost instantly. Riley wasn't known for dramatic gestures, but this moment, right here, under glowing lights, surrounded by strangers, felt like the right one. "You changed me," he said softly. "You taught me how to love, how to care, how to slow down. I want a life with you, a real one, the kind we build together." Ellie's breath shook. He opened the small box. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, smiling even through the tears. "Yes." A crowd nearby cheered. Someone clapped. Someone else whistled. And Ellie leaped into Riley's arms as snow drifted around them. Their wedding was small, warm, intimate. They chose a garden in Fairmount Park. Simple chairs, white roses, sunlight filtering through leaves. Ellie walked down the aisle on her mother's arm, tears in her mother's eyes matching her own. Riley stared at Ellie like he had never seen anything so breathtaking. Their vows were short but full of heart. When Riley said, "I'll choose you every day," Ellie's lips trembled. When Ellie said, "You are home to me," Riley nearly lost his composure. They danced to a soft R&B song Ellie's mother loved, then later to a classic rock track Riley grew up on. Two worlds blending seamlessly. Family, laughter, joy. A perfect beginning. They moved into a modest townhouse in University City, a place that felt like a bridge between both their backgrounds. Mornings were spent making coffee in their tiny kitchen. Ellie often teased Riley for stacking mugs like a robot. Riley teased her for leaving cabinet doors open. Evenings meant movies on the couch, dinners out, and long conversations about the future. They talked about travel. They talked about kids. They talked about growing old together. For a while, everything felt easy. Everything felt right. Everything felt like it would last forever. But life, as they would learn, had its own timing, its own lessons, its own tests, and the first cracks would begin to show sooner than either expected. The first year of their marriage felt like the life they had both dreamed of, comfortable, hopeful, full of small joys that made the world seem simple. But life rarely stays simple, especially when two people are trying to grow careers, dreams, and a family all at once. The shift didn't happen in one moment. It arrived quietly, softly, almost unnoticed. At first, Ellie and Riley brushed it off as fatigue, busy schedules, or temporary stress. But the small cracks forming beneath their feet were real and growing. Ellie found out she was pregnant on a rainy afternoon. She stood in the bathroom holding the test in her trembling hands, her heart pounding so loudly it felt like the room vibrated with it. When Riley came home later than expected, soaked from the weather and exhausted from another long day, Ellie was sitting on the couch, staring at the positive test resting on the coffee table. He froze when he saw it. "Ellie, is that—" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes, not from fear, but from overwhelming joy. "We're having a baby." Riley's expression softened instantly. His exhaustion evaporated. He took her into his arms, lifting her slightly off the couch as he whispered against her hair, "We're going to be parents." They spent that evening wrapped up together, planning names, picturing their future, imagining the tiny life growing inside Ellie. Riley pressed his ear to her stomach even though nothing could be heard yet. "Just practicing," he joked. Ellie laughed, running her fingers through his hair. That night felt like a promise of everything beautiful ahead. But pregnancy was harder than either of them expected. Ellie's morning sickness didn't limit itself to mornings. Some days she could barely keep food down. Others, she felt dizzy, overwhelmed, emotional. Her body was changing fast, and her emotions were shifting just as quickly. Riley tried, truly tried, to be supportive. But just as Ellie entered her second trimester, his company landed a massive client contract. Overnight, Riley's schedule exploded with meetings, deadlines, and endless demands. He told Ellie it would be temporary. A few months, he promised. Then things would calm down. But temporary turned into long stretches of late nights and early mornings. Ellie spent countless afternoons sitting on the living room couch, one hand on her growing stomach, listening to the quiet hum of the house as she waited for Riley to walk through the door. Sometimes she waited until midnight. Other times he didn't come home until she was fast asleep. When he did come home, he was tired, too tired, emotionally drained. Their conversations shifted from playful to practical. How was your day? She'd ask. Busy, he'd answer. Really busy. Did you eat? Later. I have a call in an hour. Ellie would nod, pretending she understood. But inside, she felt something tightening. A quiet ache she didn't want to name yet. The baby kicked for the first time on a Tuesday afternoon. Ellie was lying on the couch, reading a parenting book someone from the community center had given her. She gasped when she felt the soft flutter under her hand. "Oh my God," she whispered, smiling with tears in her eyes. She grabbed her phone and called Riley immediately. He didn't answer. He was in a meeting. Ellie waited an hour, then two. When he finally called back, her excitement had dissolved into exhaustion. "Hey," Riley said gently. "Sorry, I couldn't pick up earlier. What's up?" "He kicked," Ellie whispered, forcing a small smile as she cradled her stomach. "Our baby." "He kicked." Riley's voice brightened. "Really? Already? That's amazing, Elle. I wish you were here to feel it," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you." He meant it, but meaning it didn't fill the empty side of the couch she had been staring at for hours. One evening, Ellie went out of her way to make a special dinner. She cooked his favorite dish, set the table, lit candles, dressed up just a little, hoping to surprise him. She wanted a night where they weren't just parents-to-be or stressed adults juggling too much. She wanted to feel like his partner again. Riley texted her at 8:13 p.m. "I'm so sorry. Another late meeting. Don't wait up." Ellie stared at the message, then at the food, then at the untouched plates. Her throat tightened. She ate alone, blew out the candles, went to bed early. When Riley finally came home, she was asleep, curled on her side, hand protectively over her stomach. He stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her with a mixture of love and guilt. He whispered, "I'm trying, Ellie. I'm trying." But she didn't hear him. As Ellie moved into her final trimester, her emotions bubbled just beneath the surface, partly from hormones, partly from loneliness. One afternoon at the community center, she found herself tearing up because a teenager she mentored gifted her a tiny crocheted hat for the baby. "You okay?" a co-worker asked gently. Ellie nodded quickly. "Yeah, just emotional, I guess." But she knew the truth. She missed her husband. She missed feeling like they were building this together. She missed being able to rely on him without feeling guilty for needing him. At night, she sometimes cried quietly into her pillow, hoping Riley wouldn't hear. Most nights he didn't. He wasn't home yet. It happened late in her 8th month of pregnancy. Ellie woke suddenly with a sharp, painful tightening in her stomach. Fear shot through her. She tried to breathe, to calm herself, to remember everything she'd read about contractions. But this felt wrong. Too early, too sudden. "Riley." She whispered into the darkness. The apartment was silent. He wasn't home. She grabbed her phone and called him. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. Her heart pounded as she struggled to stand. She leaned against the wall, breathing through the pain as uncertainty clawed at her. Was this labor? Was something wrong with the baby? Was she overreacting? She didn't know, and she hated that she didn't know. She dialed her mother with trembling hands. Her mom arrived quickly, helped her into the car, and rushed her to the hospital. As Ellie lay on the triage bed waiting for the doctor, she kept whispering, "Where are you, Riley? Please pick up." Her phone remained silent. Doctors confirmed it was a false alarm, stress-induced, likely brought on by exhaustion. But the emotional damage was real. When Riley finally called back 2 hours later, sounding tired and unaware of the chaos she'd faced, Ellie's voice was flat. "I thought something was wrong with the baby," she said quietly. "What? Ellie, why didn't you call me?" "I did," she whispered. "Twice." There was a long silence on the line, a heavy silence, and in that space, small cracks widened, cracks that neither of them knew how to fix yet. The weeks after Ellie's false labor scare were tense in ways neither of them fully spoke about. They moved through their days politely, carefully, as if walking on eggshells around the fear that had taken root that night. But despite the tension, they welcomed their son Jerome into the world with overwhelming love. Ellie cried the first time she held him. Riley stood beside her, brushing her forehead gently, whispering, "He's perfect, Ellie, just perfect." For a while, the joy of their newborn softened the edges of their problems. But life with a baby is unpredictable, exhausting, and unrelenting, especially when both parents are already stretched thin. Ellie was navigating sleepless nights, hormonal swings, and physical recovery. Riley was drowning beneath the heaviest workload of his professional life. Their lives no longer overlapped, they collided. And then came the night that altered everything. It was close to midnight. Ellie was rocking Jerome in the living room, humming softly as he fussed in her arms. His tiny face was flushed, his breathing uneven, and every instinct in her body screamed that something was wrong. She checked his temperature again. Still too high. "Come on, baby. Please feel better," she whispered shakily, bouncing him gently. Jerome whimpered, his small hand gripping her shirt. Ellie felt her heart squeeze painfully in her chest. She looked toward the front door out of reflex. Empty. Riley had texted earlier saying he'd be late. Again, Ellie dialed his number. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. She tried again, and again. No answer. Her pulse quickened as Jerome's breathing grew more labored. She grabbed a thick blanket, wrapped him tightly, and paced the living room floor with nervous steps. The room felt too quiet, too still, too full of fear. "Please, Riley," she whispered into the air. "Where are you?" She dialed again, her voice trembling. The phone rang longer this time, but still no pickup. Jerome whimpered louder. His little body shook with discomfort. Ellie's chest tightened so sharply she felt dizzy. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she held her son closer. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay, baby. I've got you. You're okay." She grabbed her keys, her bag, and hurried toward the door. But her hands were shaking so badly she dropped the keys twice. She couldn't believe she was doing this alone. Not again. Not tonight. Riley finally walked in 40 minutes later, exhausted and unaware of the storm waiting inside. He closed the door gently, dropped his keys on the table, and rubbed the back of his neck. "Ellie," he called softly. "I'm home." Ellie walked into the room at the sound of his voice, hair messy, eyes red, Jerome fussing weakly in her arms. She looked like she had been holding herself together with sheer willpower. Riley's face shifted instantly. "What's wrong?" "Where were you?" Ellie asked, her voice cracking under the weight of fear and frustration. "I told you, work ran late." "What happened?" Ellie swallowed hard. "Jerome has a fever. It got worse. I've been calling you for almost an hour." Riley's chest tightened. "I'm so sorry. My phone died during the last meeting. I didn't see." "You didn't see because you weren't here, Riley," she snapped, tears spilling again. "He's been crying and burning up and struggling to breathe, and I was alone." Riley stepped closer instinctively. "Give him to me. Let me see. Ellie, let me help." She pulled Jerome slightly back against her chest, protective. "Help? How? You weren't here." The words hit him harder than a physical blow. "I didn't know." "That's the problem," she whispered sharply. "You don't know because you're never here." Riley's voice tightened with frustration and guilt. "Ellie, that's not fair. I'm doing everything I can." "No," she cut in, shaking her head. "You're doing everything for work, and we get whatever is left. Ellie, do you know how terrifying it is to think something might be wrong with your child and the person you need doesn't answer?" "I said I'm sorry, but you weren't here." Ellie exploded, her voice breaking. "I needed you, Riley. Our son needed you." Riley swallowed hard, his breathing uneven. "I'm trying to support this family. I'm doing this for us." "That's what you always say," Ellie whispered bitterly. "But what's the point of providing for a family you never show up for?" The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Jerome whimpered again, and Ellie wiped her face quickly, trying to keep herself composed for his sake. "We're taking him to the hospital," she said quietly. "Now?" Riley nodded, guilt flooding his expression. "Let me grab the car seat." They worked silently, mechanically, both afraid to speak, afraid of what might come out next. At the hospital, doctors checked Jerome thoroughly. Thankfully, it wasn't life-threatening, a viral infection, uncomfortable but treatable. Ellie sighed with relief as Jerome settled under the nurse's care. Riley exhaled too, but the tension in Ellie's body didn't ease. She sat on the stiff bench in the hallway, staring forward as if replaying every moment of the night. Riley sat beside her cautiously. "Ellie." She didn't answer. He tried again. "I'm sorry. I know I messed up tonight. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, her gaze was full of hurt. Deep hurt. Old hurt. Accumulated hurt. It wasn't just tonight, Ellie said softly. Tonight was just the moment I realized I can't keep doing this. Riley's heart dropped. Ellie, every time I needed you, she whispered, you were gone. Every big moment, every scary moment. Every time I was overwhelmed and terrified and needed my husband. I was working, he said helplessly. Yes, she replied, and I was carrying everything else alone. Riley's voice broke slightly. I didn't mean to make you feel alone. But you did, Ellie said, tears sliding silently this time. And I don't know how to trust that things will change when they haven't. Riley felt something inside him collapse, the moment he had always feared without realizing it. Ellie, please, we can fix this. She shook her head slowly. I don't think we know how anymore. On the drive home, Jerome slept in his car seat, breathing softly. The car was so silent it felt unreal. Riley kept glancing at Ellie, but she never looked his way. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers intertwined tightly as though holding herself together. When they reached home, Ellie gently unbuckled Jerome and carried him inside without a word. Riley followed behind her, feeling like a ghost in his own life. As she laid Jerome in his crib, Riley stood at the doorway, struggling to find the right words. Any words. Ellie kissed their son's forehead, took a slow breath and whispered, "Good night, baby." Then she stood, turned toward Riley, and said the words that broke him open. I can't do this anymore, Riley. I'm exhausted, and I'm losing myself. Something has to change, and I don't know if it can. Riley reached for her hand instinctively, but she stepped back, not harshly, but firmly. Clearly, I'm done begging you to choose us, she whispered. Those were the last words spoken that night. They slept in separate rooms for the first time, and the quiet between them was louder than any argument they had ever had. The morning after their breaking point was painfully quiet. Riley walked into the kitchen at dawn, hoping to find Ellie there. Hoping, maybe, that the night had softened her heart the way regret had softened his. Instead, he found an empty room and a sink full of dishes, proof of a long, exhausting night that neither of them had healed from. He heard movement down the hall. Ellie came out of the nursery holding Jerome, who was calm but still fussing softly. Her eyes were tired, her face pale from the emotional weight she carried. Did he sleep okay? Riley asked gently. Ellie nodded without meeting his eyes. A little better. Her tone was short, distant, not cruel, but guarded. She wasn't angry anymore. She was resolved. Riley stepped forward, hesitant. Ellie, about last night. We can't pretend it didn't happen, she said quietly. We can't pretend we're okay. Her voice cracked ever so slightly at the end. Riley wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to cry with her, but she was already walking past him, as if she didn't have the emotional strength to reopen the conversation. He watched her sit on the couch, bouncing Jerome gently, staring at nothing. He knew then that something had shifted permanently. 2 days passed with minimal words exchanged. They functioned like business partners, passing supplies, checking the baby's temperature, taking turns changing diapers. But no laughter, no affection, no us. One afternoon, Riley came home early, determined to fix things. He walked into the bedroom and stopped cold. Ellie was packing a small bag. Not a suitcase, not a dramatic exit. Just a small bag, the kind someone packs when they're stepping away from something too heavy to carry. Ellie, Riley breathed, fear tightening his chest. What are you doing? She paused, fingers gripping a folded baby blanket. Her shoulders shook as she steadied herself. I need space, she whispered. We need space. Riley felt the floor tilt beneath him. You're leaving? I'm taking Jerome to my mom's for a while, she said, still not turning around. Just a few days. I need clarity. I need to breathe. Riley stepped closer. Ellie, please don't do this. We can fix us. We can. She finally turned, and the tears streaming down her face silenced him. Riley, she whispered. I've been trying to fix us alone for months. I can't keep fighting for both of us. He swallowed hard. I'm not asking you to fight alone. I'm here. I'm trying. Her voice trembled. Trying isn't enough when I'm drowning. Jerome whimpered in his bassinet, sensing the tension. Ellie scooped him up gently, holding him close. Riley felt desperation clawing inside him. Ellie, don't take him from me. She froze. The pain in her eyes deepened. I'm not taking him from you, she said softly. He needs both of us. But he needs a mother who isn't falling apart, and I can't keep pretending I'm okay. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't manipulation. It was truth. And truth can break a person in ways anger never could. A few days later, Ellie agreed to meet with Riley at a counseling office, a quiet, neutral space where their pain could at least be spoken aloud without interruption. The counselor was soft-spoken, calm, and patient. She encouraged them to talk through their experiences. Ellie explained her loneliness, her terror during the pregnancy, her exhaustion while caring for Jerome almost entirely alone, her heartbreak at feeling invisible to the man she once viewed as her safest place. Riley listened, shoulders trembling, jaw tight. He wanted to defend himself. He wanted to explain the pressure he'd been under. But when he opened his mouth, his voice cracked. "I didn't realize how much I was hurting you," he whispered. "I thought I was doing the right thing by working hard. I thought I was protecting our future." Ellie wiped her cheeks. "Our future doesn't matter if we're losing ourselves in the process." Riley reached for her hand instinctively. She hesitated, then let him take it, barely. Their fingers touched, but the warmth wasn't the same. The counselor asked them to list things they needed from each other. Ellie said, presence, partnership, emotional support. Riley said, understanding, patience, a way to rebuild. But even as they spoke, something in Ellie's expression revealed a truth she hadn't said aloud. She didn't know if rebuilding was still possible. At the end of the session, the counselor gently suggested weekly meetings. Ellie agreed. Riley agreed. But life, as it often did, intervened. The following week, just before their second counseling session, Riley received an urgent call from work. A major system crash had jeopardized a high-stakes contract. He needed to come in immediately. He stared at the clock. Their session was in 40 minutes. He called Ellie. When she answered, her voice was flat. "Are you on your way?" Riley closed his eyes. "Ellie, something happened at work. I need to go in." A pause. A deep, resigned pause. "Of course," she whispered. "Work first." "Ellie, it's not like that. It's always like that, Riley." Jerome cried in the background. Ellie didn't soothe him right away. She just listened to him cry as if the sound confirmed something she already knew. "I'm tired," she whispered. "I'm tired of being second. I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of trying to save something by myself." "Please don't say that," Riley pleaded. "I'll cancel the session," she said softly. "Don't worry." The call ended, and something inside both of them ended with it. 2 weeks later, Ellie arrived at their home with papers. Riley opened the door, hopeful, nervous, desperate. But when he saw the envelope in her hand, his hope shattered instantly. "No," he whispered. "Ellie, please." She held the papers to her chest. "I can't do this anymore, Riley. I can't raise our son in a home where we function like roommates and strangers. I can't live in constant disappointment." "We can still fix this," he insisted. "We can try again. We did try," she said gently. "We tried until there was nothing left to give." Her voice wasn't angry. It was tired. Heart tired. "I love you," Riley whispered desperately. Ellie closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'll always care about you. But love alone isn't enough. Not when everything else keeps falling apart." Riley felt his chest cave in as she handed him the envelope. "Please sign," she whispered. "Let's not drag this out." His hand shook as he took the papers. He didn't sign that day. He couldn't. But he signed eventually, because he loved her too much to trap her in something that was hurting them both. Months later, sitting in a quiet courtroom, the judge confirmed the divorce. Ellie held Jerome in her arms. Riley stood beside them, hands shaking, heart hollow. There were no dramatic scenes, no shouting, no accusations, just two people who once promised each other forever, now learning how to let go. When it ended, Ellie whispered, "Take care of yourself, Riley." He nodded, unable to speak. Jerome reached out his little hand toward Riley. Riley kissed it softly, fighting tears. And just like that, their marriage became a memory. The first few weeks after the divorce felt like walking through a world stripped of color. Riley moved into a modest apartment closer to his office. A practical choice, he told himself. But practicality didn't soften the silence that greeted him every night. The apartment had clean walls, tidy counters, and a bed that felt far too large for one person. The emptiness pressed on him like a weight he couldn't shake. The first night he lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the sound of the judge's voice confirming the end of their marriage. Ellie's quiet tears, Jerome's small fingers tangling in the collar of her shirt, the way she whispered, "Take care of yourself, Riley." It echoed in his mind for weeks. He didn't know how to take care of himself anymore. He built a life around work, the one area he could control. He spent long hours in meetings, code reviews, presentations, anything that kept his mind occupied. Colleagues praised his dedication, calling him focused and driven, unaware that he was drowning himself in responsibility simply because the alternative was facing the hollowness of going home to an apartment that held no trace of Ellie's soft laughter or Jerome's excited babble. At night, when the city's noise faded, the silence sharpened every regret he carried. He'd sit in the rocking chair, the one he insisted on keeping from Jerome's nursery, and replay the moments he wished he could take back, the late nights he chose work over family, the missed calls, the unkept promises, the look in Ellie's eyes the night she said she felt like a single parent. And slowly, painfully, he understood that the divorce wasn't a sudden event. It was accumulated heartbreak. Ellie moved into a warm, modest two-bedroom in a quieter neighborhood. She decorated it with bright artwork from the teens she mentored at the community center and filled the rooms with soft blankets, children's books, and the toys Jerome loved most. Her mother visited often. Imani came by to keep her company, bringing home-cooked meals and offering to watch Jerome so Ellie could rest. Ellie was surrounded by support, but even with the love of her community, there were nights when she sat alone on her couch, staring at the empty spot beside her, wondering how everything had slipped away. She never badmouthed Riley, not once. Even when her friends asked gently, "How are you holding up? Do you regret leaving?" Ellie always answered with quiet honesty, "He's not a bad man. He just wasn't present, and I couldn't raise our son feeling invisible." Her voice always trembled on the last word, giving away that the pain hadn't vanished. She had simply learned how to carry it. She poured herself into her work, helping young people navigate their own challenges. Helping them gave her purpose. Seeing Jerome grow gave her joy. But healing wasn't linear. Some days were triumphant, others were heavy. The hardest part was handing Jerome over during drop-offs. Every Friday afternoon, Ellie stood near her front steps, Jerome's little backpack slung over one shoulder and his favorite plush dinosaur tucked into his arm. Riley would pull up right on time, never early, never late, always respectful. Jerome would squeal, "Dada," and stretch his arms toward Riley. It warmed Ellie's heart every time, even though it also bruised parts of her she didn't talk about. "Hey, buddy," Riley would whisper, lifting Jerome effortlessly. "Ready for our weekend?" Jerome would nod enthusiastically, babbling about snacks, cartoons, and whatever he'd been obsessed with that week. Riley listened with full attention, soaking up every detail. Ellie watched them with a mixture of love, relief, and a quiet ache she hid behind steady eyes. Riley always greeted her gently. "How've you been?" "Busy," she'd reply with a polite smile. "You?" "Working," he'd answer, though he never admitted the work was now just a shield against loneliness. They kept it cordial, respectful, mature, but beneath the surface, every interaction carried an unspoken truth. There was still a connection, not romantic, not hopeful, just human, a connection that refused to die, even when the marriage had. Riley cherished every second with Jerome on those weekends. He planned activities, packed snacks, and took him to the park where he'd push Jerome on the swing until the little boy giggled so loudly passers-by smiled as they walked by. He documented everything, photos, videos, voice notes of Jerome saying new words. He sent them to Ellie not to impress her, but because he wanted her to feel included. Ellie appreciated it more than she said. After Riley dropped Jerome off on Sundays, Ellie always noticed a shift. Her son was calmer, happier, full of stories about building towers or making pancakes with Daddy. It reassured her that even though their marriage had failed, they had succeeded in giving Jerome a loving, stable bond with both parents. But in the quiet moments after bedtime, Ellie still wondered, when did we stop being partners? Why couldn't love alone keep us together? 2 years passed slowly. Riley became known in the tech community as a relentless worker, but no one saw the man who returned home every night to an empty apartment that still held a box of Jerome's old toys in the corner. A box Riley could never bring himself to close. The rocking chair remained untouched except on nights when regret became too heavy to bear. Riley would sit in it and imagine a different life, one where he had listened sooner, where Ellie hadn't cried herself to sleep, where Jerome had 2 parents under one roof. He never dated. He couldn't. His heart wasn't available. Not when every part of him still beat for the family he lost. On one particularly quiet night, he whispered into the stillness, "I hope you're happy, Ellie. I hope you're safe." He meant it, even though it hurt. Ellie grew into her independence. She learned how to fix little household issues on her own, budget wisely, and create a life where Jerome thrived. Friends encouraged her to start dating, but she always declined gently. "I'm not ready," she'd say. And it was true. Part of her still felt tethered to the past, not because she wanted to return to it, but because healing requires revisiting the hurt with honesty. She focused on growth, not replacement. She kept a framed photo of Riley and Jerome on a shelf in the living room, not because she couldn't move on, but because she wanted her son to always know that his father was part of his story. Whenever Jerome pointed at the photo and said, "Dada," Ellie smiled softly and replied, "Yes, baby, that's your daddy." There was no bitterness, just acceptance. One moment stood out during those 2 years, Jerome's second birthday. They held a small party at Ellie's mother's house. Riley was invited. He brought a carefully chosen gift, arriving early to help set up. Ellie thanked him politely, surprised by how natural it felt to see him play with Jerome and chat with her family. There were moments when Ellie glanced at him and saw glimpses of the man she first fell in love with. Patient, attentive, gentle. But she quickly reminded herself, healing doesn't mean returning. Healing means growing. Riley felt the same contradiction. Watching Ellie laugh with Jerome, watching her family surround her with love, he realized she had built a world where she was no longer burdened by his absence. He was proud of her, and it broke him in the quietest way. On a cold February night, 2 years after the divorce became final, Ellie was driving home late from work. Riley was already asleep, exhausted after a long week, and missing Jerome terribly. His phone rested beside him on the nightstand, silent, until it wasn't. At exactly 2 a.m., the screen lit up with Ellie's name, the moment that would change everything. The moment that would rewind their separate lives and throw them back into each other's hearts. The moment when the world paused, and a single call forced Riley to confront the truth. He never stopped loving her. He never stopped caring. And now, he might lose her forever. The phone buzzed again. Riley awoke, and the story returned to the night that opened Chapter 1. The ICU room was dim, lit only by a small lamp above Ellie's bed and the glowing numbers on the heart monitor tracing each slow beat. The world outside moved on, but in here, everything seemed suspended, every second stretching, carrying the weight of uncertainty. Riley sat in the chair beside Ellie, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly as if he could hold the universe together with nothing but sheer will. He had not changed clothes since the night before. His hair was disheveled, his eyes red from lack of sleep. But he refused to look away from Ellie, even for a moment. He hadn't left the room except when nurses insisted on performing routine checks. Even then, he stood outside the door, pacing silently until they let him back in. The moment he returned to her side, his shoulders loosened slightly, as if the only place he could breathe was right here. Ellie was still heavily sedated. Her left arm rested in a cast, her ribs carefully wrapped. Purple bruises marked her cheek and along her collarbone. Seeing her like this struck Riley deeper than anything in his life ever had. He had seen her tired, frustrated, joyful, amused, every shade of emotion, but never broken. Ellie had always been the strong one, the resilient one, the grounding presence in every storm. Now it was his turn. He leaned forward, brushing a loose braid away from her forehead with a trembling hand. "Ellie, I'm here," he whispered, though she couldn't respond. "I'm not going anywhere." He repeated that promise every hour. Maybe he said it for her. Maybe for himself. Maybe because saying it out loud kept him from drowning in the guilt rising in his chest. Around 6 a.m., a nurse entered quietly to check Ellie's vitals. Riley straightened immediately. "How is she?" he asked softly. "She's stable," the nurse replied. "The swelling is slowly reducing. She may wake up again later today." Relief washed over him so strongly he had to steady himself. "Thank you." The nurse glanced at his face, recognizing exhaustion. "You should rest. We have a recliner." "I'm fine," Riley cut in gently but firmly. "I'm staying with her." The nurse didn't argue. Something about his voice made it clear there was no point in trying. When she left, Riley exhaled slowly and settled back into the chair. A little while later, he heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Ellie's mother appeared in the doorway, holding a warm coat around her shoulders. Her eyes were puffy, but she managed a tired smile when she saw Riley. "Morning," she whispered. Riley stood immediately. "Morning, ma'am." She approached him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Imani said you stayed all night." He nodded, clearing his throat. I didn't want her waking up alone. Mrs. Brooks looked at her daughter, then back at Riley. She'd want you here. Her voice wavered slightly, not from judgment, but from gratitude. Despite everything that had happened in the past, seeing Riley's unwavering presence softened something in her expression. Go home for a bit, she urged quietly. Shower, change clothes. I'll call you if she wakes up. But Riley shook his head. I can't. Not right now. His voice broke before he could stop it. I almost lost her. Mrs. Brooks inhaled sharply at the raw honesty in those words. She gave a single, slow nod, understanding more than she voiced. She pulled up a second chair and sat beside him. For a long time, neither spoke. They just sat with Ellie, two people who loved her in different ways, united by the same fear. Around 7 a.m., Riley's phone buzzed. A message from Ellie's mother's neighbor. Jerome woke up asking for breakfast. He's in good hands. Riley exhaled shakily. I should go get him, he murmured. Mrs. Brooks touched his arm again. I'll stay here. Go check on him. He needs familiarity. And he needs you. Riley hesitated, looking back at Ellie. Leaving her, even for an hour, felt like walking away from oxygen. But Jerome was his son, and Ellie would want him to prioritize the little boy who was the center of her world. He leaned down, kissed Ellie's forehead gently, carefully avoiding bruised areas, and whispered, I'll be right back, I promise. Then he left the hospital, stepping into the cool morning air, where fog still lingered over the parking lot. Every breath felt heavy as he made the short drive to the neighborhood where Ellie lived. Jerome opened the door before Riley even knocked, standing there with messy curls, footy pajamas, and sleepy eyes. Dada, he whispered, lifting his arms. Riley scooped him up immediately, holding him tight. Hey, buddy, he murmured, kissing the top of his head. I'm here. Jerome rested his head on Riley's shoulder, unaware of the night's events. Riley inhaled the familiar scent of baby lotion and cereal, simple things that had once been background noise in his life but now hit him with a rush of emotion. He carried Jerome inside, thanking the neighbor who had watched him briefly. In Ellie's kitchen, everything was exactly as she kept it, organized, warm, lived in. Riley felt a sharp pang at the sight. This was the home Ellie built after leaving him. A home he only entered for drop-offs and pickups. A home where he was welcome, but not part of the daily rhythm. Jerome tugged on his shirt. Dada, food. Oh, right. Riley gently set him in his high chair. Breakfast. I can do that. He searched through cabinets, unsure where Ellie kept everything. When he finally found cereal, he poured it into a bowl, added milk, and set it in front of Jerome. Jerome wiggled happily and began eating, spilling milk on the tray. Riley smiled faintly despite everything. Messy eater, he said softly. Jerome giggled. Dada, clean. Oh, is that how this works? Riley grabbed a cloth to wipe the spill. The neighbor left after confirming Jerome was fine. Riley stayed in the kitchen, watching his son munch cereal and swing his legs. He'd missed ordinary mornings like this. He'd missed being part of the world Ellie created with their son. He'd missed the softness of family life, the thing he once pushed aside in favor of deadlines and meetings. Jerome finished eating and reached up. Dada. Hold. Riley lifted him again, resting the toddler on his hip as he prepared a small bag with snacks, juice, and toys. He changed Jerome out of pajamas and into warm clothes, all the while thinking, Ellie usually does all this alone. She carries everything. She never asked for help because I never made space to give it. It hit him like a punch to the chest. I'm sorry, he whispered into Jerome's hair, though the little boy had no idea what those words meant. An hour later, Riley brought Jerome back to the hospital. The moment they stepped into the ICU hallway, Jerome clung to Riley's neck, sensing the seriousness of the environment. Riley whispered reassurance as he walked back to Ellie's room. Mrs. Brooks stood up when he entered. He's awake and alert, she said softly, referring to Jerome. Go on. Take him to her. Riley swallowed hard and stepped closer to Ellie's bed. Ellie's eyes fluttered open at the sound of their footsteps. Her gaze was hazy but searching. When her eyes landed on Riley holding their son, something shifted across her face, a mix of pain, relief, and something gentler. Riley leaned down so Jerome could see her. Mama, Jerome whispered, reaching out. Ellie's lips trembled as she touched his tiny hand with her good one. Hey, baby, she breathed. Then her eyes lifted to Riley. You came back, she whispered, her voice fragile but clear. Riley's throat tightened. He stepped closer so she could see them both. "I said I would," he replied quietly. "I meant it." In that moment, seeing him holding their son, exhausted but devoted, Ellie felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: safety, support, a hint of the love she thought had been buried beneath old wounds. Riley looked at her injuries, swallowed hard, and whispered, "I'm here now, Ellie. Whatever you need, I'm here." For the first time since the accident, Ellie closed her eyes not from pain, but from peace. And that small shift, barely noticeable, marked the beginning of something neither of them expected, a reunion not forced by fear, but built through presence. 3 days after the accident, Ellie was finally cleared for discharge. Her injuries were healing slowly, though every movement required careful support. The nurses worked gently around her, describing her restrictions in calm professional tones. No lifting, no twisting, no sudden bends, and definitely no pressure on her left side. Riley listened to every instruction, as if preparing for the most important exam of his life. He stood beside the bed with Jerome on his hip, nodding earnestly while adjusting the toddlers. Wait every few minutes. Jerome kept reaching toward Ellie, wanting her, sensing her tenderness. But Riley held him back with gentle reminders. "Careful, buddy. Mama's hurting. Soft touches only." Ellie watched him. This version of Riley she had rarely seen before, patient, present, aware of everything around him. There was no phone buzzing in his pocket, no anxious glances at his watch, no distracted half-smiles while his mind drifted to work. He was here, fully here, and for the first time in a long time, she felt less alone. When it was time to leave, Riley stepped forward immediately. "I'll carry you," he said softly. Ellie blinked in surprise. "Riley, I can walk, maybe." "But you shouldn't," he replied, calm but firm. Before she could protest, he slid one arm beneath her knees and the other behind her back, lifting her with careful strength. Her breath caught, not from pain, but from the unexpected closeness. His body was warm, and she could feel the steady rise and fall of his chest. She looped her uninjured arm around his shoulder instinctively, steadying herself as her cheek brushed against the fabric of his shirt. The moment felt strangely familiar, echoing memories of early mornings when he carried her from the couch after she'd fallen asleep watching a movie, or the night he carried her across the threshold when they became husband and wife. But now it carried a new weight, a fragile tenderness touched by time and distance. Jerome toddled beside them, holding onto Riley's pant leg, and Mrs. Brooks followed with Ellie's small hospital bag. They reached the car, and Riley set Ellie down gently in the passenger seat. He adjusted the seatbelt carefully, making sure nothing pressed against her ribs. His fingertips lingered a moment longer than necessary, brushing a loose braid behind her ear. She met his eyes, her heart catching at the concern etched across his face. "You good?" he asked softly. Ellie nodded. "Yeah." "Thank you." Riley exhaled through his nose, relief, tension, something deeper, and shut the door. Mrs. Brooks drove ahead of them to prepare the house. When Riley carried Ellie up the porch steps, she released a shaky breath. "Riley," she murmured, heat rising in her cheeks, "you really don't have to." "Yes, I do," he said, voice low and unwavering. "Let me do this." He carried her inside and lowered her gently onto the couch, adjusting pillows around her so nothing strained her ribs or arm. Ellie sank into the cushions, breathing deeply as comfort settled into her bones. Jerome toddled forward and placed his plush dinosaur on her lap. "Mama better?" he asked in a tiny, worried voice. Ellie smiled softly. "A little better, baby." Riley set down Ellie's medications, water, and a soft blanket before rolling up his sleeves. "I'll get lunch started," he said. Ellie blinked. "You're cooked?" He paused, attempting to. Her lips tugged upward. "That might be the most dangerous part of this whole week." Jerome giggled, as if he understood the joke. Riley gave a sheepish grin, shaking his head. "We'll see how it goes," he murmured, heading toward the kitchen. Mrs. Brooks chuckled. "I'll supervise. Just in case." The clatter that followed moments later drew Ellie's attention. She heard a pan hit the stove harder than intended, followed by Riley muttering, "That's fine. It's fine. I meant to do that." Ellie couldn't see the kitchen from where she lay, but she could visualize the entire scene, Riley flipping through cabinets trying to remember where she kept the spices, Jerome standing close enough to be curious but far enough to avoid trouble, and Mrs. Brooks calmly redirecting Riley every few minutes. Then came the sharp smell of something overcooking. "Riley." Ellie called. "It's under control," came the immediate reply, which was exactly what someone without control would say. Mrs. Brooks added, "It's edible. A beet. Maybe." Ellie laughed, a sudden, unexpected sound that made her wince from the soreness in her ribs, but she didn't care. The sound filled the room with warmth that hadn't existed in her home for a long time. Eventually, Riley emerged holding plates of grilled cheese sandwiches and a small bowl of soup, clearly Mrs. Brooks's quick save. He looked embarrassed. "I was aiming for something fancy." Ellie raised an eyebrow. "This isn't fancy?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's survival." Jerome clapped. "Dada food." Riley's face brightened despite the failure. You heard him. A chef in the making. They all settled into a quiet, comfortable tableau. Ellie resting with pillows propped beneath her arm, Jerome sitting on Riley's lap while he fed him tiny bites, and Mrs. Brooks watching both of them with a knowing smile. When lunchtime ended and Mrs. Brooks excused herself to run errands, an unexpected silence settled between Ellie and Riley. Not awkward, not tense, just intimate in a way they hadn't felt in years. Riley cleaned the dishes quickly, then returned to Ellie's side. Jerome had fallen asleep on the floor with his dinosaur tucked under his chin, giving them a rare moment alone. Riley sat on the edge of the coffee table, leaning forward so he wasn't looming over her. "You feeling okay?" he asked quietly. Ellie nodded. "Yeah, just tired." A long pause sat between them. Riley swallowed and looked down at his hands. "I've been thinking," he said softly. "A lot." Ellie watched him carefully. "When the nurse called me," his voice trembled. "When she said you were in surgery, something in me just snapped. I couldn't breathe, because I realized I could lose you for real this time." Ellie's chest tightened in a way unrelated to her injuries. She didn't interrupt. Riley continued, eyes glassy. "All night, I kept replaying every mistake I made, every moment I thought I had more time to fix things. And then I got to the hospital and found out you asked for me." Ellie closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. Riley's voice lowered. "Why, Ellie? After everything, why was it me?" She opened her eyes slowly, meeting his. "Because you were the only one I wanted," she whispered. "In the moment everything went dark, your name was the only thing I could think of. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just needed you." Those words broke him open. He breathed out hard, leaning forward slightly, as if absorbing them physically. "Ellie," he whispered, "I'm so sorry I didn't show up for you the way I should have. Back then, and now." She shook her head gently. "You're here now. That's what matters." Another heavy silence settled, but this one felt like soft ground being cleared for something new. Riley shifted closer, resting his elbows on his knees. "I know I can't erase the past, but if you'll let me, I want to show you the man I should have been. Not through promises, through action." Ellie studied him. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't desperate. He wasn't trying to fix everything at once. He was simply telling the truth. Her voice cracked. "You being here, taking care of Jerome, carrying me to the car. You didn't have to do any of that, Riley." "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." She breathed out slowly. "Why?" His answer came instantly. "Because the first love you." She closed her eyes, overwhelmed, not confused, not afraid, just emotionally full in a way she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "I never stopped needing you," she whispered. "Not even that night, after the crash. I just wanted you to come." "I'm here," he murmured. "And I'm not leaving again." Ellie didn't speak, but she didn't have to. The softening in her expression said everything. For the first time since their divorce, the walls between them didn't feel like solid brick. They felt like something beginning to crack, letting in light. The afternoon light drifted through Ellie's living room curtains, casting a warm glow that softened everything it touched. Jerome was still asleep on the rug, his tiny chest rising and falling, in a rhythm that made the room feel safer, steadier. Ellie shifted slightly against her pillows, wincing from the sharp tug at her ribs, and Riley immediately moved closer. "You okay?" he asked, voice low, almost tender. "I'm fine," she whispered. "Just moved wrong." Without hesitating, Riley adjusted the pillows behind her, mindful of every bruise, every fragile inch of her. His hands were gentle, his movements deliberate, and for a moment Ellie felt something familiar press against her heart, something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Once she was comfortable again, Riley sat back down on the coffee table, elbows on his knees, leaning forward as if he couldn't bear to be too far from her. His eyes stayed fixed on her face, absorbing every detail as if afraid she might vanish. The quiet between them wasn't awkward. It wasn't cold. It carried weight, years of unspoken words, unresolved questions, wounded memories, and buried affection rising slowly to the surface. Finally, Ellie took a breath and spoke. "Riley, there's something I need to say." He straightened immediately, every muscle going still. "Anything. Just tell me." Her lips trembled as she gathered the strength to voice the feelings she had carried silently for so long. "When I left, when I walked out that night with Jerome, I wasn't trying to punish you." Her eyes glistened. "I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just empty. I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel important. And that scared me more than anything." Riley's chest tightened. "Ellie, I know I failed you." She shook her head carefully. "Let me finish." He nodded, swallowing hard. Ellie's eyes drifted toward the window, as if remembering a version of herself she no longer missed, a woman drowning in exhaustion and emotional neglect. "I kept hoping you'd notice how much I was struggling," she said softly. "I kept thinking, maybe this week will be different. Maybe he'll put the phone down. Maybe he'll ask how I'm doing. Maybe he'll hold me without being half asleep. But every time I reached out, I felt like I was reaching into the air." Riley let out a quiet breath, his guilt rising like a tide. "I should have been there. I should have listened." "Riley," she whispered, her voice shaking, "I felt invisible in my own home." That single confession broke something open inside him. He leaned forward, voice unsteady. "You were never invisible to me, not for a second. I was just lost. I thought providing was enough. I thought if I worked hard now, we'd be happy later. I didn't see how lonely you were. I didn't see how much you needed me right then." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't need you to be perfect. I just needed you to be present." His throat tightened, and for a moment he couldn't speak. "Ellie," he said finally, voice thick with emotion, "I'm so sorry I made you feel alone. You were carrying everything while I carried nothing, and I hate myself for not realizing that until it was too late." "Riley." "No," he said gently. "You deserve to hear this. Every word of it." He took a slow breath. "I wasn't the husband you needed. I wasn't the father Jerome deserved. I let my priorities drown everything that mattered. And walking into this hospital room, seeing you hooked up to machines, it hit me that I almost lost you without ever making things right." Ellie blinked back tears, her chest rising and falling unevenly. Riley continued, voice steady but wounded. "I'm not asking for forgiveness because of the accident. I'm asking because I finally understand the damage I caused. And I'm willing to do anything, to be the man who protects your heart instead of breaking it." Ellie's lower lip trembled, and she looked away briefly, overwhelmed. Riley shifted from the table to the floor, kneeling beside her so he could look up into her eyes. The position wasn't dramatic. It was sincere, grounding, human. "You deserved better, Ellie, and I swear to you, if you give me the chance, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel alone again." Ellie exhaled a shaky breath. "Riley," she whispered, "do you know what the hardest part was? Even after everything fell apart, even after the divorce, a part of me still loved you. I tried to bury it, ignore it, force it away, but it never left." His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of hope igniting. He didn't move closer, didn't rush her. He waited. Ellie's voice softened. "When the car hit me, when I felt everything go dark, the only person I wanted was you. I didn't think about my past. I didn't think about mistakes. I just thought, I need Riley. Please let him come." Riley pressed a hand to his mouth, overcome. A tear slipped down his cheek, landing on his wrist. Ellie wiped her cheek with her good hand, steadying her voice. "That was when I realized, no matter how much I tried to separate my life from you, my heart still remembered you." The room felt still, sacred. Riley lifted his gaze to her, cautious but hopeful. "What does that mean, for us?" Ellie swallowed. "It means there's still something here. Something I don't want to ignore anymore." Riley's breath caught. "Ellie." "But," she continued gently, "I'm scared, Riley. Scared of trusting you again. Scared of opening that door, only to watch everything fall apart a second time." "I know," he said immediately, "and I won't rush you. I won't push you. I'll move at your pace, not mine." Her eyes softened. "I've noticed how you've been with Jerome, how you've been with me. You're different, Riley, and I don't mean temporarily. I mean genuinely." Riley nodded slowly. I promised myself that if I ever got a second chance, I wouldn't waste a single day. Ellie looked at him for a long moment, her heart beating unevenly. She reached out gently with her right hand, her only uninjured hand, and brushed her fingers against his cheek. The gesture was soft, uncertain, tender. Riley froze for a moment, as though afraid to interrupt something sacred. "Come here," she whispered. He leaned forward slowly, carefully, giving her every second to pull back if she wanted. She didn't. Their foreheads touched first, a warm, quiet connection that spoke louder than any apology or promise. And then Ellie tilted her face upward just slightly. Their lips met. It was not passionate or urgent. It was soft, slow, a whisper of a kiss that carried years of pain, apology, longing, and unspoken love. The kind of kiss that marked a beginning, not a return to the past, but the start of something rebuilt with care. When they finally parted, Ellie exhaled a trembling breath. Riley cupped her cheek lightly. "Ellie, thank you." She gave a small, exhausted but genuine smile. "We'll go slow, but maybe we can try again." Riley nodded, eyes filled with emotion. "Slow is perfect, as long as it's with you." He rested his forehead against hers again, and Ellie let her eyes drift closed, letting herself feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real hope. The kind that comes after surviving everything you thought would break you. Morning sunlight eased through Ellie's living room curtains the next day, bright but gentle, as if the world itself understood she needed softness right now. Ellie blinked awake slowly, her body aching but her mind unusually calm. It was the first morning since the accident that she didn't wake with fear tightening her chest. She breathed deeply and turned her head. Riley was there, not collapsed in a chair, not checking emails, not distracted. He was sitting on the floor beside the couch with Jerome asleep on his lap, holding a small storybook. His eyes were closed, his head leaning lightly against the couch cushion near Ellie's shoulder. It looked like he had been reading to Jerome until both of them drifted off. Ellie watched him for several long, quiet seconds. There was a time, years ago, when this sight would have felt ordinary, a simple moment, a piece of their everyday life. But now, after everything they had endured, it felt like a miracle she wasn't sure she deserved. Riley stirred, opening his eyes. He looked up and instantly smiled, slowly, warmly, the kind of smile she hadn't seen from him since their early marriage. "Morning," he whispered. Ellie's heart fluttered. "Morning." Jerome shifted on his lap, curling deeper into Riley's chest. Riley steadied the little boy with one hand, brushing his fingers lightly over the toddler's curls. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked. "Better than I expected," Ellie admitted, her voice soft. "Did you?" He shrugged lightly. "Didn't sleep much. Didn't want to miss if you needed something." Ellie's lips parted, touched by the quiet honesty of it. "Riley, I'm fine. You don't have to stay awake all night to take care of me." He looked at her gently. "I know I don't have to. I want to." Those words settled over her like warmth spreading through her chest. Before she could respond, Jerome blinked awake, rubbing his eyes as he sat up on Riley's lap. He looked between his parents, his face lighting up. "Mama," he squeaked, clapping his hands. Ellie smiled. "Good morning, baby." Jerome crawled across Riley's lap toward her. Riley helped him get closer without bumping her injured side. Jerome laid his head gently on Ellie's stomach. "Tummy warm," he mumbled. Ellie laughed softly. "Is that your scientific observation for the day?" Riley chuckled. He's been making a lot of those lately. They exchanged a look, a shared moment of parenthood that felt natural again, not strained or fragmented. Ellie's mother arrived shortly afterward, giving Riley time to shower and grab a change of clothes. When he returned, smelling faintly of soap and fresh laundry, Ellie couldn't help, noticing how different he looked now, lighter somehow, yet more grounded, present in a way he had never been before. She watched him move around her kitchen, making breakfast for Jerome, wiping the counters, checking her medication schedule carefully. Every action was purposeful, steady, committed. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't desperation. It was consistency. And that consistency slowly began to stitch something back together inside her. That afternoon, Riley approached her gently. "There's something I want to suggest," he began cautiously. "Only if you're comfortable with it." Ellie raised an eyebrow. "Okay." "Counseling," he said simply. "For us." Ellie's breath caught, not out of fear, but out of surprise. She hadn't expected him to bring it up, especially not with such quiet confidence. "We tried it before," she reminded him softly. "I know," Riley said. "And back then I wasn't ready. I walked in thinking I didn't need help, thinking we could fix things with quick talks and surface changes. But now," he looked deeply at her, "now I understand the amount of work love really requires, and if we're going to rebuild this, really rebuild it, I want us to have the tools to do it right." Ellie didn't answer immediately. She studied him for a long moment, searching his face for hesitation or fear. She found none. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's try again." Riley released a quiet breath of relief. "Thank you." A couple of days later, Ellie eased onto the couch with Riley sitting beside her. Their counselor greeted them warmly. She already knew their past. She didn't need them to repeat it. Instead, she asked one simple question. "What do you want your family to feel like moving forward?" Ellie turned toward Riley. He didn't think. He didn't choose empty phrases. He didn't overpromise. He spoke from truth. "I want our home to feel safe," he said. "I want Ellie to feel supported. I want Jerome to feel secure. And I want our love to be something we actively nurture, not something we assume will survive without effort." The counselor nodded, impressed by the clarity. Ellie inhaled slowly. "I want communication, real communication, not him assuming my feelings, not me burying them because I don't want to start a fight. I want openness." Riley reached for her hand, not tightly, not eagerly, but gently, asking permission. She let him take it. In that moment, their counselor smiled. "You're already building something new." Back home later that afternoon, Riley stood in the kitchen reviewing his work schedule. His phone buzzed with messages, but for the first time in years he didn't jump to respond. He walked over to Ellie, who was resting on the couch. "I need to talk to you about something," he said. She set aside her tea. "What is it?" "I've rearranged my work schedule," he explained. "No more late-night calls, no more emergency meetings after dinner, and I'm delegating half my responsibilities to my team so I can be fully present at home." Ellie blinked. "Riley, that's a big step." He nodded. "It's necessary. I want to build a life where you and Jerome come first, not as a statement, but as a practice." Ellie's eyes softened. "Thank you. You don't have to thank me," he said quietly. "This is what I should have done years ago." Over the next few days, a new rhythm formed. Every morning, Riley helped Jerome brush his teeth while Ellie supervised from the hallway. He prepared breakfast, still not perfect in the kitchen but improving. He scheduled walks around the block so Ellie could get fresh air without straining her injuries. At night, he read bedtime stories to Jerome, sitting beside Ellie so they both watched their son drift towards sleep. One evening, as he closed Jerome's bedroom door softly, he turned to Ellie. "This feels right," he murmured. Ellie met his gaze. "Yeah, it really does." Their lives didn't instantly transform, but each steady step, each moment where Riley showed up without being asked, became proof that their family was growing stronger, not through grand gestures, but through quiet, daily commitment. Trust wasn't repaired through speeches. It was rebuilt through action. And Riley was finally doing the work. One night, after putting Jerome down, he returned to find Ellie looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen in years. Not confusion, not fear, not guarded hope. Something warmer, something clearer. "Riley," she said softly, "I'm starting to trust you again." His breath caught, and for the first time since they stood in the courthouse dissolving their marriage, Riley truly believed they could build something new, something stronger than what they had before. The next few weeks unfolded with a gentle steadiness Ellie hadn't expected, but deeply needed. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt forced. Everything, from the simplest breakfast to the quiet evenings after Jerome fell asleep, felt like small bricks placed carefully on a foundation they were building together. Riley kept every promise, not through dramatic declarations but through daily consistency. He woke early to prepare coffee for Ellie, always checking first which mug she preferred that morning, because he remembered how her choices changed with her moods. He washed dishes without being asked. He took charge of evening routines with Jerome, giving Ellie time to rest. Ellie watched him closely, not in suspicion but in growing admiration. He wasn't performing. He wasn't overcompensating. He wasn't trying to erase the past with grand gestures. He was simply showing up, fully, quietly, respectfully, and that steadiness was becoming a source of comfort she hadn't felt in years. One Saturday morning, Riley walked into the living room wearing jeans, a simple shirt, and holding a diaper bag over his shoulder. "You ready?" he asked. Ellie, seated on the couch with her arm still braced but healing well, raised a brow. For what? The park, he said, nodding toward Jerome, who was bouncing excitedly with his little sneakers on. He's been chanting, "Slide, slide, slide," since 7 this morning. Jerome clapped. Swide. Ellie laughed. Well, how can I say no to that? Riley approached her carefully. Let me help you up. She took his hand. Not out of necessity, she could stand on her own now, but because she wanted to. He supported her gently, guiding her movements so she didn't strain anything. The warmth of his hand lingered longer than the touch itself. As they walked to the car, Ellie felt a soft wind rustle her braids and closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the simple sweetness of the day. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't marked by pain or conflict. It was just peaceful, and peace felt new. Fairmount Park stretched wide around them as they arrived, a place filled with memories of their early marriage. They had gone there for picnics, for long talks, for quiet afternoons before life became too heavy. But this time, everything felt different, renewed. Jerome burst forward in toddler enthusiasm, running toward the playground with his small legs pumping like he was racing time itself. Riley jogged behind him, calling out, "Slow down, little man. I only have one pair of knees." Ellie laughed, watching Riley scoop Jerome up before he toppled over. Riley spun him gently, and Jerome squealed in delight. Seeing them like that, father and son wrapped in joy, touched something deep in Ellie's chest. Once upon a time, Riley had been distant in these moments, distracted, half present, but now he was fully alive in them. Ellie walked slowly toward the playground bench. Riley met her there, helping her sit before he took Jerome to the swings. Ellie watched them, smiling at the way Riley counted out loud for each push. 1, 2, 3, higher, higher, Jerome yelled. Riley made sure the swing didn't go too high, keeping one hand on Jerome's back at all times. Every gesture radiated awareness, protection, love. After a while, Riley carried Jerome back toward Ellie. The toddler was giggling uncontrollably, face flushed from excitement. "Dada swing me sky," Jerome babbled. "More like 5 inches, Riley replied. Ellie reached out, brushing her fingers along Jerome's cheek. "You two look like you're having fun." Riley sat beside her, adjusting the bag at his feet. "I forgot how good it feels to just enjoy life, not rush through it." She glanced at him. "You used to rush through everything." He nodded with a soft smile. "Yeah, I did. And I didn't see what I was missing." His tone wasn't heavy with regret anymore. It was recognition. Growth. Ellie found herself leaning her shoulder against his, light enough to pull away if she changed her mind, but real enough to show she didn't want to. He didn't move, didn't tense, didn't overreact. He simply let her rest there, matching her pace. Minutes passed quietly. Families walked by. Birds chirped. The warm sunlight settled over the three of them like a gentle blessing. And then Ellie said the words she never imagined she'd say again. "I'm proud of you." Riley turned his head slowly, eyes widening just a bit. You are?" She nodded. "Yeah. You've changed, Riley. And not in a temporary way, not because of guilt. You're different. You're more—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Balanced." Riley exhaled, emotion flickering across his face. "I had to grow up. I just wish I'd done it sooner." Ellie shook her head. "We can't rewrite the past, but we can decide how our future looks." He stared at her, quiet for several seconds before speaking. "Ellie, I want that future with you, with both of you. I want to rebuild our family the right way." Her heart skipped. And yet, she didn't pull back. Instead, she let her head rest more fully on his shoulder. "Then keep doing exactly what you're doing," she whispered. A few days later, Riley sat at the dining table with a laptop open but untouched. He had been thinking about it for weeks, and every moment he spent with Ellie and Jerome made the truth clearer. He knew what he had to do. Ellie came around the corner, moving slower than usual as she adjusted her healing ribs. "Everything okay?" Riley looked up at her with calm certainty. "I'm stepping down." Ellie froze. "Stepping down from what?" He closed the laptop, folding his hands. "From being CEO." Her breath caught, and she sat down across from him. "Riley, that's not a small decision." "I know," he said. "And I've thought it through. I've delegated most of my responsibilities already. The board will vote next month. I'll stay on in a lighter role, but I won't run the company anymore. Ellie stared at him, processing. Why? He leaned forward. Because I realized something. I don't want a life where my son only knows me as the busy dad. I don't want our marriage, or whatever we're rebuilding, to take second place to a title. I'm tired of choosing work over what really matters. A beat, then another. Ellie's eyes softened with something warm and steady. Riley, I didn't ask you to do this. I know, he replied. That's exactly why I'm doing it. She swallowed hard, emotion filling her expression. Are you sure? More than anything. Tears gathered in her eyes. Not from sadness, not from fear, from gratitude, from hope. She reached across the table and took his hands. You're becoming the man I always knew you could be, she whispered. Riley's eyes glistened. He squeezed her hands gently, his voice low. I'm becoming the man you deserve. Ellie felt her heart expand. Slow, steady, undeniable. This wasn't the Riley she left years ago. This was the Riley who was finally ready to love with intention, to prioritize with purpose, to build a future with clarity. And in that moment, Ellie realized she wasn't falling back in love with him. She was falling in love with who he had become. The evening settled slowly over the neighborhood, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and purple. Ellie sat on the porch swing Riley repaired earlier that week. She hadn't used it much since the divorce. Every creak reminded her of the nights they used to sit there together, whispering dreams about the future. But tonight, something felt different. The swing didn't feel like a reminder of what they'd lost. It felt like a place where something new could begin. Ellie shifted gently, careful with her ribs but relaxed enough to enjoy the cool breeze brushing her skin. Inside the house, she could hear the soft sound of Jerome's laughter as Riley helped him with his bath. Their son's squeals echoed through the open window, pure, joyful, unfiltered sound that warmed her heart. A moment later, Riley stepped outside, drying his hands on a towel. He wore a simple shirt and sweatpants, a look that felt intimate in its normalcy. His hair was slightly damp from helping Jerome splash around too much. He smiled when he saw Ellie. You okay out here? He asked, coming closer. Ellie nodded. Yeah, I'm just thinking. He settled beside her on the swing, letting it shift gently under their combined weight. Good thoughts? He asked. She smiled softly. Mostly. Riley's eyes flicked toward her face, searching, gentle. You sure? Ellie drew a slow breath, letting her gaze drift to the yard. I was thinking about how different things feel now. Not perfect, not complete, but different in a way I didn't expect. Riley nodded. I feel that too. The swing rocked forward and back, each movement slow and calming. Ellie could feel him close, not crowding her, not pushing for answers, just present. A few quiet seconds passed before Riley spoke again. You know, when we first moved into this house, we sat out here almost every night. His voice was low, reflective. We used to talk about how many kids we wanted, what we'd name them, where we'd travel, how we'd celebrate our anniversaries. Ellie smiled faintly at the memory. Yeah, we were dreamers back then. We still can be, he whispered. Ellie's breath hitched. It wasn't the words, it was the hope behind them. Hope delivered not as a plea, but as a possibility. She turned her head slowly to meet his gaze. Riley's eyes held no desperation, no fear, no rushing. Only clarity. Ellie, he said softly, I know we're taking things slow, and I want to keep it that way, your pace, not mine, but I need you to know something. Her heart thumped. I'm all in, Riley said. For real this time, with intention, with devotion, with everything I am. Ellie felt her throat tighten. Riley continued, voice gentle but full. I'm not trying to rebuild what we had before. That version of us couldn't survive the weight of our lives. I want to build something new, something stronger, something honest. Ellie swallowed hard. Riley. He reached into his pocket, not quickly, not dramatically, but with steady purpose. When he pulled his hand out, Ellie's breath caught. It wasn't a flashy box. It wasn't a ring he'd bought last minute. It was their original wedding ring, the one she had returned during the divorce. The metal glowed faintly under the porch light. Ellie stared at it, her lungs tightening with emotion. I kept it, Riley said quietly. Not because I couldn't accept the divorce, but because I couldn't accept the idea that love like ours had to end forever. Ellie blinked quickly, trying to steady her breath. Riley shifted slightly on the swing, turning toward her. I'm not asking for a wedding tomorrow. I'm not asking you to forget the past. I'm not asking for an instant rewind. He lifted the ring slowly, his hand trembling just slightly, not with fear, but with reverence. I'm asking for your partnership again, your trust, your heart, at the pace you feel safe with. Tears welled in Ellie's eyes. I want to propose a second time, he whispered. Not because I want to recreate our past, but because I want to build a future worthy of you. A future worthy of Jerome. A future worthy of the family we can be. Ellie pressed her fingers to her lips, unable to speak. Riley leaned forward just a little. Ellie, will you marry me again? Not the old way, not rushed, not overwhelmed, but with clarity, commitment, and love that has learned how to survive. The world felt still, slow, gentle. Ellie inhaled shakily, a tear slipping down her cheek. Riley. Her voice trembled. Yes. He froze, eyes widening, not with shock, but with overwhelming gratitude. She nodded again, tears streaming now. Yes, I'll marry you again. Riley let out a shaky exhale, lowering his forehead to hers. Their breaths mingled, warm, tender, full of relief and promise. He slipped the ring onto her finger with the delicacy of a man who knew exactly what the moment meant. Ellie looked at it, her heart overflowing. The ring no longer symbolized what once failed. It symbolized what they were choosing now. A beginning. A promise renewed through growth, not nostalgia. A second chance shaped by experience, not fantasy. Just then, the porch door creaked open, and Jerome waddled out in pajamas, clutching his dinosaur plush. Mama? Dada? He mumbled sleepily. Both of them turned at the exact same moment. Jerome blinked at the ring, then at their faces, then climbed onto Riley's lap with uncoordinated enthusiasm. Ellie reached over with her good arm, pulling Jerome gently against her side. The three of them huddled close on the porch swing, warm, connected, whole. Riley kissed Ellie's forehead. Ellie kissed Jerome's head. Jerome patted both their cheeks like he was claiming them. Together, a family, a new beginning. The porch swing rocked softly beneath them, carrying them into a future they were choosing with open eyes and open hearts. Life doesn't always give second chances, but when it does, they come with responsibility. Show up with action, not promises. Listen with patience, not pride. Love with intention, not assumption. Choose your people every day, not when it's convenient. Healing takes time. Rebuilding trust takes effort. But love, when nurtured, can become stronger than it ever was before. Before you go, take a moment and help this story reach more beautiful souls. Hit the like button. It truly helps you to push this video out. Comment your location and the time you're watching. We love seeing our global family. Share this story with someone who might need hope today. Subscribe to Mr. Graham Stories for more emotional, inspiring storytelling. And finally, tell us in the comments, do you believe people can truly change for love?